And we're live. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Ruby from the Feed Real Institute. And today I am here with Carol Bramson from Side by Side. Hi, Carol. Thank you so much for being
Hi,
here.
thank you. So glad to be here.
Yes, I am excited to talk about today's topic. We're going to be discussing Eastern food therapies, which when I first heard about this, I was like, is that the same thing as TCVM? And so all of these questions came up, and I think this is going to be a really strong topic for us to discuss. While we're waiting for people to jump in, just to give you guys a reminder, this live is going to be posted on our Facebook account and our YouTube account. So if you miss any of it, or if you need to step out, no worries. We are going to repost it. Carol and I are going to talk for about 30 to 40 minutes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments, and we will get to those in about 30 minutes and make sure that we answer any of your questions so you can hop out and hop back in if you need to. So let's get started. Carol, you are the CEO of Side by Side, and you have a history of work in the human health industry. Tell us about your journey.
Thank you. Yes. So I've always lived kind of a health and wellness lifestyle. I'm grateful to have been raised in a household where that was a dominant player, food for its healing properties, and whole food in particular. And so when I started my professional career, I had a desire to kind of further that interest and effort. And, what is the way to do that the best? Quite frankly, it's with nutrition and it's with movement. So two really important things when you think about, our human health and the health of our pets as well. So I spent a good portion of my career supporting companies or even philanthropic entities in ways that was really focused on wellness and providing access to individuals so that they could not only learn about ways to improve their wellness, but also have access to it. So my participation in things like the American Heart Association and food insecurity, and trying to make sure that there's healthy access to good foods. So just prior to starting Side by Side, I had been working on a project in healthy food ingredients. And I built a database with the help of a consultant that had about 3,000 companies on it. And they were food ingredient companies both in the US and in Europe. And then I was systematically going through and introducing myself to these companies to learn about their actual ingredients and how they handled those, to know whether or not they were protecting the natural nutrients. And so I was visiting hundreds of manufacturing facilities and learning quickly that, a lot of heat doesn't really do well for food ingredients. And that's something we're certainly going to talk about a little bit here regarding pet food. And but then it really opened my eyes into things like freeze dried and other raw feeding, which is, really helpful for both humans and for our pets. So in the process of this project, I then decided, let's get a dog for the first time ever. I really wish somebody had told me what I was missing in having a dog in my life, but that's okay. Wrigley came into our lives. He just turned 9 last month.
Oh, and my one just turned 9 as well.
Is that right? Yeah, I can't believe it. Everybody who meets him says they can't believe he's 9 years old, and I say that's because he eats well. But as a new pet owner, I asked around, what should I feed, and was surprised when they told me to feed kibble. And after, here I am immersed in this project, looking at all these natural food ingredients, and I pick up this brown chunk of something, and I'm just like, this can't be it.
Doesn't feel right.
This just totally does not feel right.
Yeah.
And that is when the journey started. And one of the first things I did was watch that documentary, Pet Fooled.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, that was a real eye-opening experience and hard to watch, quite frankly,
For
because
sure.
these pets give us unconditional love. And, kind of as their guardian, I think it's important for us to turn around and take as good a care as we can possible. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't realize how similar of stories we have. We have a lot in common. We share the same birthday.
all right.
We
Yes.
both got our first dogs as adults and got them around the same time.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do a lot together.
Yeah, we are.
Our
For those of you that are just dropping in, I am live with Carol Bramson from Side by Side. Carol's going to be one of our partners at the Feed Rail Summit this October. She's actually teaching a workshop, which I am so incredibly stoked about. This was just a match made in heaven when we were introduced to each other because our workshops, our hands-on workshops, are an opportunity for everyone to really learn more about a specific subject. So I'm really excited. Do you want to tell the audience what you're going to be talking about at our workshop?
Thank you. I'm like jumping out of my seat wanting to tell the audience about what we're going to do. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Eastern food therapy, but one of the things we're going to talk about is the fact that the tongue, as like the only muscle that you can actually see, is one of the most important diagnostic tools for traditional Chinese veterinary medicine and traditional Chinese medicine for humans as well. And there's a lot of characteristics. So we've come out with what we call our balance indicator, and we'll ask people to share a picture of their dog with their tongue hanging out, so that we can take a look at it and make a recommendation on whether warming, cooling, or neutral foods would benefit their pet. As part of the workshop, we'd like to do that in advance of them arriving, and therefore they can begin to develop diets based on their individual pet. So we're going to be including a variety of ingredients and encourage the participants to begin to build diets based on what they've tried in the past and know that their pet might like. And we'll provide a learning opportunity with each ingredient that they might select. The other piece of it is that we're going to share with them what the nutrient profile is of the diet that they've assembled. So you often hear this complete and balanced, which is important element. And our diets are all complete and balanced, utilizing only whole foods, and we don't use any supplements. So we're going to utilize that knowledge to help these participants understand where the nutrients are coming from in the diet that they're creating for their own pet, which will be a really interesting education process because there's a lot of really important nutrients that are derived from things like seeds.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we're going to be talking and educating them on that as they create kind of a personalized diet for their pet.
Oh, that's so exciting. I think, well, now with social media, you see a lot of content going around that talks about warming or cooling proteins. And there's the second part of that, which is your dog a cool dog or a hot or neutral dog? And that's really what we're looking at, not like feeding cooler proteins because it's hot outside or warmer proteins. So we're going to get into that. I am curious for our audience that is tuned in right now. If you have heard of Eastern food therapy, if you have heard of warming and cooling proteins, let us know sort of if you've tried them before, because that will help steer our live and our conversation today so we can make this as informative as possible for you guys. So Carol, for those that are unfamiliar, can you explain what Eastern food therapies are and how that differs from, let's say, Western approaches to nutrition?
Yeah, sure. So Eastern food therapy has been around for thousands of years, and it is widely used in many other parts of the world. It is also known as traditional Chinese veterinary medicine at its core. And it's one of four basic modules that are utilized in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine for healing purposes. So some of the others would include things like acupuncture, massage, herbal therapy, and food therapy.
And are they to be used holistically, or do generally we see people use one approach and not another?
It's interesting. So we often look towards the Chi University in Florida, which is a wonderful academic university to provide education in all of the modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually will post on their website which vets have attended which courses, and they map it on the map of the US. I think the most popular modality for holistic vets typically starts with acupuncture or massage. And then you will see some who do all four and get into herbal therapy and food therapy as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have all four in your arsenal, the vet or even the layman who takes it upon themselves to learn is much better suited to utilize that.
Sure.
But food as medicine, which is essentially what Eastern food therapy is kind of taking us back to basics. I mean, to your point about Western medicine, where did that Western medicine come from? It came from Eastern. It's just that in our desire in the Western world to make everything the same every time we make it, it resulted in a decline in the use of food and herbs for medicinal purposes, and moving into a zone where they used supplements or synthetics.
Mm-hmm.
So Western may tend to be more pharmaceutical focused, and it tends to treat a illness or a symptom, whereas Eastern medicine tends to be more about well-being and preventative medicine, and it treats the root cause. So one of the beauties of Eastern food therapy is that using food for its healing purposes, you are healing from within. So, and you are addressing the root cause of why those symptoms are in place. So as a perfect example, if a dog might get a hot spot and you go to a Western focused vet, you will likely receive some sort of topical spray. And that will alleviate the symptom of the hot spot itself, but it may likely not address why they got the hot spot in the first place. So it comes back. And we've had many customers come to us, and oftentimes they're at the end of their rope in terms of dealing with some of these Western remedies. And they're looking, they begin to learn about Eastern medicine and more of a preventative, holistic approach in healing from within. So in the case of a hot spot, by definition, hot, you're dealing with inflammation. So you want to cool it down. So cooling foods would be recommended for healing purposes. And a vet trained in herbal remedies might also recommend some of those as well.
Yeah, hotspots are just all too common. We see that a lot in our consultations. What are some other common ailments that you have seen your food help heal from within besides hotspots?
I think that what we've seen the most is there's anything dealing with inflammation.
Yeah.
So allergies, there might even be something like pancreatitis. So anything that has inflammatory properties, cooling foods really make a significant difference. And there's some really simple fundamental aspects of why that works. I mean, if you think about something like cucumbers have very high water content,
Mm-hmm.
and they're cooling. Rabbit as a protein has a very high water content, and it's very soothing to the system. On contrary to that, if a pet owner was feeding primarily chicken and the pet has recurring allergies, inflammation, itchy skin, they might even be warm to the touch. They're seeking out cool places to lie down, like on the tile floor. While they can feed them chicken, we recommend they don't until they can bring their body back into balance, utilizing cooling foods for their healing properties.
Can you give some examples of cooling foods and then warming foods?
Yeah, sure. So on the protein spectrum, rabbit and duck for dogs are great diets to impart cooling. Those would be coupled with things such as in our new Tetra stew that's coming out in a couple months. We actually have a button mushroom broth in the stew, which is also a cooling ingredient. You'll find things like blueberries in there as well.
I'm saying, like I'm going to eat it myself.
Well, yeah, actually you could. I mean, except for the fact that when we grind the rabbit, we include the bone because that calcium from the bone is so important as well, and that our bodies can't digest it like a dog's body can. So those would be some, great cooling ingredients. And on the warming side, things like chicken is a warming protein. You might find sweet potatoes, and lamb is also something you see frequently in diets. Well, so
how was it determined whether a protein was cooling or warming? I mean, I know TCVM has been around for centuries, really.
Yes.
And at some point, somebody wrote it down, like recorded it in a textbook. But do you know how that was determined?
It literally was determined to many, thousands of years ago by interpreting the post-digestion effects on the body of each ingredient.
On humans, I would imagine.
On humans, yeah. And increasing, and then more animals. This is we call this our Bible.
Yeah.
It's kind of heavy.
What's it called?
It's veterinary medicine food therapy. And I, integrative and traditional Chinese veterinary medicine food therapy, small animals and equine. We do use this as our go-to Bible, although there are other sources out there. And it was based on a lot of scientific research and understanding the implications on the body of each ingredient. And it's not just, and I think the other important point, it's not just the protein. Sometimes, and that's one thing that's different about side by side is that we, carefully selected each and every ingredient and did our best to assemble ingredients to create a cooling diet. And it goes into the fruits, vegetables, the seeds, seaweed, eggshell, stuff like that, as much as possible. And, I've read about when you just think of it as the protein. Like, let's take something like lamb. Lamb is often served with mint, right? Well, lamb is hot, mint is cool. So they begin to cancel each other out a little bit. So you've got to, what we did here was to create diets that were highly focused on the energetic qualities we wanted to deliver on. And then we took a step further and we color coded our packaging to make it easy to shop.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. You need that. I've often find myself trying to read all of the labels and being like, what's the difference between this, and that? So color coding is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I wanted to go one step further into you mentioned, if you find your dog is often seeking out a cool place in the house or laying on the floor, that's my dog. Um, that means that they're likely either warm or cool pets. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are, as I was starting to mention a little earlier, the tongue is one of the best diagnostic tools for TCVM doctors to begin to diagnose whether a pet might be running warm or cool or neutral. And it's not, the color is one of the most predominant, but also the shape and any other indications. And the tongue itself is diagrammed, if you've seen or read up on TCVM, that different organs of the body are representative on the tongue. So like the heart is at the tip of the tongue. And it kind of almost mirrors the body in the manner in which it relates to different organs. So a trained practitioner will really evaluate the tongue. So I would encourage you to take a look at your dog's tongue and even take it a step further and take a picture with their tongue hanging out and try our QR code on our website, and we'll help you with that. When we first came out with the brand, we had what we called a pet health assessment, where we asked a bunch of questions. Does your dog like to lay in the sun, or does he like to lay in a cool tile shower somewhere or something like that? Because that behavioral element it does provide great information. What we found was that sometimes people were like, I'm not sure if my dog's tongue is pink, and in the extremes, like a really red tongue, that's easy to identify. Or if you see maybe teeth marks on the sides indicating there's some signs of inflammation, like almost doesn't quite fit in their mouth. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, the tongue might be very pale, almost look purple. And that indicates, that they're running cool and they need warming.
Got it. This is a good question from Rachel. Is the tongue always right? Sometimes I think my dog's tongue changes from day to day.
Actually, I just read something in one of these textbooks that said that, literally, and I quote, "The tongue is almost always right." But there are certain breeds that have, there are breeds that have black tongues. So that clearly is outside. And it is important to look for changes, like in any sort of health issue or concern for us, whether it's for us or our pets. Identifying the changes is important to recognize. And you might be bringing their body back into balance for a period of time, and then it may fall out of balance again. So you want to recognize that. We like to say we encourage, utilizing different foods, but as long as they might be warming, cooling, or neutral at a particular point in time to help the body heal and come back into balance.
Sure. Yeah. That was my next question is it your recommendation if my dog runs hot, should I only be feeding cooling proteins for the entirety of his life?
Yeah, likely not. That would likely not be necessary. But it is helpful for them to get back into balance, to recognize. And if your pet has a tendency to, there are pets and certain breeds that do have a tendency to run warmer, then you would really be helping soothe them in their system and their temperament, quite frankly, by helping bring them back into balance. The other important thing I want to make sure we hit on is, we are all about whole food nutrition. And I know that's music to your ears, because that's why we're here. And that's why we're kindred spirits, seriously. Because part of using food as medicine for healing purposes under Eastern food therapy is recognizing that whole foods are the best way to impart the nutrients you need into the body. Because, and I often say this when I'm speaking or talking to others, your doctor recommended you eat broccoli. He didn't tell you to eat broccoli powder, right? He said broccoli, and he said broccoli for a reason, because the structure of the broccoli and kind of the phytonutrients that are inherent in that combination of fiber and vitamin A and the other nutrients is in a format that your body was meant to absorb it. So when you start to break it down, your body can't absorb it as well. So the extent to which we can feed our pets in a whole food ingredient format, we're going to see a difference.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm also a huge proponent of feeding variety, right?
Yeah.
Variety is key. That's something that I think anyone who has made the switch from an ultra processed food to fresh food is automatically going to feed a variety of proteins. That said, I know that my dog Icon has a sensitivity to turkey. So I do feed turkey every now and again, but if I feed it every single day, that's when we discovered our first hotspot. Actually, I had a surplus of turkey, the perks of having a dog food business, and then all these leftovers, except you got to switch it up. But I agree with you. I think if nothing else, be aware of what your pet needs, and what they do well with and don't potentially do well with, but remember to keep variety in the diet.
Yeah.
We have another question from a Gem. What's the difference of neutral proteins? Yeah. Oh, we didn't even talk about neutral proteins. We talked about warming and cooling, but not neutral.
Yeah, I mean, neutral proteins and neutral fruits and vegetables, like warming and cooling, it all dates back to evaluating the body's reaction and the internal organs' reaction to them that was tested. And in that regard, things like beef or bison, which are neutral proteins, are, they're pretty much keep you level.
Right where you're at.
And they are great to add as you're trying to bring variety into your diet. They're a great source. I'd rather, if somebody's dog would benefit from feeding cooling and you want to bring some variety, I'd rather see them bring variety in the form of a neutral diet than going into a warming, which might likely cancel out the work that they had just done. And I think from a variety perspective, it goes beyond, like in the case, our diets come in a shelf-stable format, but we are huge proponents for raw feeding and lightly cooked frozen. Our freeze-dried diets are blended. They're gently blended in a frozen state. So the ingredients are frozen. We blend them together and then we form them either into the little patties or morsels. And then we just take the water out of it. So it's basically freeze-dried raw. And we do that so that there's an ease of feeding and storage and the like. But we also highly support raw feeding in its frozen format as well. And that's a great way to introduce some variety and make sure that your dog's getting the moisture they need. We also are big supporters of lightly cooked frozen as well. I mean, we have a lightly cooked diet in our Tetra, these little Tetra boxes, which is shelf stable, but I alternate lightly cooked frozen. Actually, Raised Right is one of the brands that we really like, and for my pets. And I think that's really important. And as a brand in the future, with this technology platform, one of my goals is to support other brands that are doing the right thing by recommending their food as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think, our fresh food space is really so small. When you're in it, it feels like there's a lot of competition and everybody's doing it. But when you look at the majority of dog owners and what they feed around the country, around the world, even, I want to say fresh food makes up like less than 6% of what people are feeding their dogs. So being in a space that's really supportive of each other, and I use a lot of other brands. I mean, we encourage people to DIY, make your food at home so you know exactly what goes in it. And frankly, it's cheaper, just like it would be to cook at home rather than order in or eat out. But there are so many brands that are doing it right, and all kind of for the same reason, right? We want our dogs to live longer, healthier, and happier lives.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why you initially chose to do freeze dried and prepare your food in that way?
Well, actually, when we first launched the brand in 2018, we had a lightly cooked frozen option and we had a freeze dried option. It was the same diet. It was just, it came in those two formats. We also had a raw diet that we were struggling a little bit in order to get it into mainstream distribution. But I loved our lightly cooked frozen. That was 2018. We were kind of ahead of the curve. And unfortunately, our manufacturer was like, this is challenging, and wanted to focus on the freeze dried. So we didn't have the option. We were kind of forced to, at that point, or find another manufacturing partner to be able to continue to offer that. We might come back with it at some point. Yeah. We've actually, when I was in the Pacific Northwest, there was a number of retailers that were very interested in carrying our brand, and they asked if we would come out with a raw frozen, which is easy because we make our product raw frozen. It's only the next step in the freeze dryer that makes it freeze dried, right?
Yeah, you'd actually be eliminating a step in that process.
Yeah, exactly. We might even be able to, I'd like to say we could bring it out for a lower price as well. But as you probably know from industry research, it's distribution of a frozen product's not easy. So you got to really,
it opens up a whole nother set of challenges. Where is your product manufactured?
We manufacture our diets in Wisconsin, and we have a small treat manufacturer that we partner with in Indiana for our treats. You and I had the chance to talk a little bit before getting on the call. I'm here today at my farm in Connecticut, which we recently moved to, and we have plans to start making some particularly treats initially, utilizing the local resources. So, and that'll allow us to experiment a little bit and be innovative. I mentioned there's a shiitake mushroom farm just up the road from us. So I see us, collaborating on some interesting things going forward.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. I've already invited myself over, by the way, whenever I'm in the East Coast.
Well, actually, what I'd love to do is do an event out here. So when next time, if you ever have any thoughts of doing Feed Real event on the East Coast, I've got a location for you.
Ah, okay. All right. Now the wheels are turning.
Right.
Very cool. I see a couple other questions in here that I just want to make sure we get to before we run out of time. Camila says, if my dog runs hot all the time, is it bad to only feed cooling proteins year round? I think we addressed that you don't have to feed cooling proteins year round, but the question is it bad if I do?
It's not bad. I'd like to see you introduce some variety in there. So variety in the actual recipes themselves and the proteins and fruits and vegetables that go into making those. And I would encourage you to incorporate some neutral to start and see how your dog does with that. Because that can be a great way, even if it's just neutral treats. There are a lot of great treat options. So I think that's a good way to introduce some variety.
Sure. And I think also, because your dog runs hot, that doesn't always indicate that there is an issue. I mean, that's just a characteristic, I would
Right.
say, that they have,
Right.
And I do think it changes. I mean, I recently gave birth and I run really hot now. It wasn't always like this, but I'm like hot all the time. So things change within our lifespans. And I think, the same goes for our dogs. So just like you said, being aware of what they do well with and feeding variety so that, when you can or when you need to feed a cooling protein to sort of bring them back into balance, you can use that as a tool rather than trying to do that year round. That makes
Right.
sense.
I agree. And I think that, temperament in Eastern practices is a really important variable. And I think you'll see within their temperament how they might be suffering. And if you don't, then you may not need to address it as rigorously as you might otherwise think.
Agreed. There's another one. What if they have both characteristics of warm and cool? My cat has inflammation, but always wants a sunny spot or runs cool. That's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think, in those instances, I would zero in on a symptom like inflammation, because inflammation, whether it's our pets or it's us, is a precursor to other more serious issues that can come up. So I would encourage you to, and we are always really support talking to your vet, and particularly seeking out holistic vets who have decided to self-train. It's unfortunate that in Western vet schools, the amount of time spent on nutrition therapy is very, very small. So I had mentioned this university because vets, for continuing education purposes, will seek out obtaining education on things like food therapy. So I would focus on something like inflammation versus seeking out sitting in the sun, which just might be a place that they find really pleasant.
Yeah. And I think, well, when we talk about inflammation, as you said, that's really the body's way of defending itself. It's saying that there is a problem. So it's indicative of something else that's really going on. And you're right. Maybe your cat just likes that spot in the sun.
I know my dog, he just loves to look out the window and kind of watch the world go by. And sometimes, that often finds him sitting in a sunny spot, whereas, but for him, it's really pleasant.
We also got a couple questions in from Instagram that I'm going to pull up. This one is, from Echo Chops. We're trying to reduce a lipoma using cooling proteins for a damp condition. Any advice? We haven't even talked about what damp means.
Yeah, well, so damp is oftentimes referred to, it can be referred in both warming and cooling situations. And so it's important to really understand if dampness is linked to something like having the chills, which it oftentimes can be. So if you think about yourself, um, having cold symptoms, part of our decision to elevate Eastern food therapy and how we formulated our diets and how we packaged our diets was to encourage people to use it, and not be intimidated by it, because it really works. So sometimes we go back to basics, and dampness can be also referred to as like the chills. When you think about yourself, when you have the chills and you have cold symptoms, what are you seeking out? You're going to seek out warmth.
Mm-hmm.
What did your mom give you when you had those symptoms? She gave you chicken soup, right? Um, our chicken and lamb Tetra stew is kind of a soothing kind of chicken and rice and other sort of soothing ingredients to help alleviate those sort of symptoms. So I think,
Well, this is kind of like a double
yeah,
whammy because there's a lipoma
right.
involved here.
Right, exactly, which is definitely, seek the assistance of your vet in addressing how best to treat these. And I would strongly encourage a holistic vet who can utilize. We clearly don't put any claims like that on our packaging or even on our website. We've had people share with us stories about how they've utilized our diets and the cooling properties and has helped stop or reverse the growth of.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the other every testimonial is rewarding. I mean, part of the reason we're here is to help pets live longer, but have their quality of life be better as well. And sometimes that stagnation that can occur from feeding a kibble diet for a long time, really affects their demeanor and their temperament, and they don't feel well.
Mm-hmm.
So we get testimonies about all sorts of things. One of the most memorable ones for me was an individual whose pet was suffering from frequent seizures, as many as 20 a day.
Wow.
And they started feeding our cooling diets, and we're down. Last I heard, they were down to like 4 or 2, which was a total change in the life of that pet and that
Absolutely.
Yeah. So definitely seek the advice of someone trained who can really help and go beyond just the foods, maybe to add some herbal therapies and even acupuncture and massage.
No, that's great advice. I think it's really hard when it comes to fresh food and people in our space because, as you said, a lot of them are at the end of their rope. They've tried everything, including some of the harsher medications or treatments, right? No pharmaceutical medication comes without a side effect. And you put a Band-Aid on one thing, and then it kind of erupts elsewhere, and you're trying to treat all of these things and you don't even know what the root cause is. So I think really diving into and working with a holistic veterinarian that can kind of look at the big picture and hone in on what it is that they need to focus on.
Right. I think that as well, the way that pet food is regulated in the US, to fall under kind of the FDA, doesn't provide for the opportunity to put some herbal therapies into a diet. And therefore, that sort of addition as a treatment modality is available through supplements. So working with a holistic vet that can really help bring that combination together can be make a huge difference.
Definitely. Well, we have time for a couple more questions. If you guys have some follow-ups on what Carol talked about today, please feel free to drop them in the comments. And stay tuned for a special offer from Carol at the end of this live, because I know a lot of you have been tuning into our lives and then later saying, where can I find more information on this product or side by side? And what I really want to leave you an opportunity is to talk about the tool that you guys have. Just a reminder, Carol is one of our partners for the Feed Real Summit this October. She's going to be teaching a workshop. So for those of you that already have your tickets, since the summit is a sold out event, you're going to be able to choose from one of 3 workshops. And Carol from Side by Side is going to be talking about Eastern food therapies and going a little bit more in more depth than she did today on the basics that we covered. There we go. There's one more question before you talk about your tool, your tongue tool. Camila says, I've read feeding dogs cooling foods can cause stagnation in their bodies. Is that true?
That's interesting.
That's probably a loaded question.
Yeah. If it's whole foods and is truly a cooling diet, it should alleviate stagnation, because cooling, one of the benefits of cooling is kind of a soothing, moisturizing, hydration sort of perspective. That said, there are benefits of warming foods that can address some digestive issues, and help heal the system from within. I mentioned earlier how the chicken and rice concept of providing warming properties to someone a dog who's exhibiting cooling tendencies can be very soothing, and that can also help with digestive tract sort of issues. So
that's so interesting, because you hear the common recommendation from veterinarians when your dog has an upset stomach is chicken and rice. And personally, I think that's recommended all too frequently for things that's not useful for and tend to create other problems. But an upset stomach isn't always caused by feeding warming or cooling foods, and can't always be fixed with that. There's oftentimes another reason that it's happening.
Yeah.
That was a tough question though, because there's so many follow-ups. And that's the thing about doing these lives. It's not really a very, there aren't usually straightforward answers that you can offer, because then you've got all these follow-up questions like, how long has your dog been dealing with this? And what are you currently feeding? And what have you tried so far?
But we haven't even touched on environmental issues.
Oh, that's right. That's true. That's true. We're just talking about diet alone.
Yeah. So that definitely, particularly in today's day and age, and all of the things they're exposed to, both in the house and outside of the house, can truly have effect, whether they're exhibiting warming or cooling tendencies.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to you teaching us more about that at the workshop at the summit. Tell us again, though. So there's a QR code on your website that takes us to a tool that we can use. Can you talk about that one more time?
Yeah, I'd love to. We call it our balance indicator. And it really, the idea around utilizing photo recognition. So if you hit the QR code, it will ask you to upload a picture of your dog with their tongue showing. And the good thing about it is the dog can be close up or you can be far away, and the technology will find the tongue
And I bet nobody has to go out and take a picture of their dog right now. We all have photos with our dogs' tongues hanging out.
Well, actually, yeah. And most people have them on their phone already, so they can just upload something there. But we have gotten some feedback from people that they've had a really entertaining time trying to get their dog to stick their tongue out so they can take a picture. And I see a future social media campaign that's going to be around.
Yes.
And I have to admit, I want to hijack Tongue Tuesday because, we are all about the tongue. So we should definitely be champions of Tongue Tuesday. But so what we've done here is we have utilized the photo recognition to allow for computer recognition of the tongue. And then we started with 5,000 tongues, dog tongues.
Already in the database.
Yes. And it's significantly higher than that because that was about in August of last year. And we basically taught the algorithm to identify these characteristics of the tongue, with the most important one being color at the moment. But in the future, it will include other of these characteristics, including different areas of the tongue that relate to different organs in the body. And after just a few seconds, it'll come back to you and say, based on the photo that you shared, it appears as though your pet might be running warm. And therefore, based on that, we would recommend you feed cooling ingredients and a recommendation on some cooling products that they can choose from.
Very cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very awesome. Yeah. So for those of you that are tuned in, once we finish up this live, please head over to Side by Side's website. It looks like one of our team members has dropped that in the comments. So there's a link right there to the balance indicator. Give it a shot and see, if you already know or think whether your dog runs cool or warm. I would be curious to see if the balance indicator tells you as much or if you get a different result.
And we are all about education. And, part of our goal in launching this brand was to educate on whole foods and the use of foods for healing purposes. So we have people on our team who are steeped in this sort of knowledge, and they're ready to help out in any way they can. We have our website itself is geared towards education. We actually have a training module that pet owners or store owners can take to learn more. But one of the things we wanted to do is to make it easy and fun, quite frankly. And I always say that you can't, because it's all whole foods, you can't pick wrong, but you can pick right.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Carol, again for joining us. Oh, you do have a special offer.
We do have a special offer. We have a 35% off, utilizing a code REALBALANCE. And so if you go to our website and you plug that in, that offer will be extended.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we have had the opportunity to try some of your food, and I think our team has been very, very happy with that. Yeah. And we're looking forward to seeing you this October. You guys make sure you check out Side by Side's website. Carol is amazing. Like I said, we had the opportunity to meet just a few months ago and very quickly learned how much we have in common and what we share in our philosophy when it comes to food and dogs and the whole food space. So thanks again, Carol, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank everyone else for being here. Have a nice weekend.
Take care.